Perfect. So, welcome to my chat about Azure DevOps privilege escalation, where we're going to do some pipeline shenanigans. Of course, I should properly introduce myself first before we dive in. This is what I look like when it's not Halloween. It's quite an unusual sight. So in my spare time, I'm a spooky craft nerd. I like making things. So if during lunch or maybe at the end of the day, you're a little bit tired of hearing about security all the time, come find me and show me pictures of stuff that you made. I would love that. But in my professional life, I'm a security testing nerd turned devsecops nerd. So I started out being a security tester, pen tester, whatever you want to call it. But in recent years, I have sort of changed my field of interest into DevSecOps, meaning security best practices in the DevOps lifecycle. So with that combination of interests, you end up with a kind of offensive DevOps mindset. Because that's what we're going to do today. We're going to use DevOps infrastructure, Azure DevOps, to do bad things. Yeah, we love bad things. So before we dive in, a little bit of housekeeping to get out of the way. Feel free to ask questions whenever. I think the presentation is quite generously timed, so I have lots of time for questions. If at any point you want to butt in with a clarification or a question, just raise your hand and we'll make sure that someone with a mic gets to you and we can deal with that immediately or at the end, doesn't matter. Microsoft had nothing to do with this. I know that I'm presenting on Azure DevOps, which is a Microsoft product. I also have a demo involving an Azure cloud subscription, which is a Microsoft product. I am not affiliated with Microsoft. I did not get paid by Microsoft. I also don't think that you're going to come away from this presentation thinking that it was a particularly strong endorsement. I don't hate it or anything. It is what it is, but yeah. And my employer also had nothing to do with this. Obviously, some of the stuff that you're going to see was inspired by stuff that I first dove into at work. But it was my idea to come here, and anything that I'm telling you is my opinions. All good? All right. So first I'd like to know who has some experience with Azure DevOps. So who is currently working with Azure DevOps or works at an organization where they use Azure DevOps? Okay, that's a decent number of hands. Great, great. And who has already tried escalating their privileges using a pipeline in Azure DevOps? All right, I hope that by the end of this presentation, you're all going to give it a try. And then also maybe close the gaps after you've, succeeded at hacking the thing. Cool. So let's set the scene before we start with the demos, just so that we're all on the page. On the same page about what I'm talking about when I say Azure DevOps, pipelines, privileges, all that stuff. So, how does application development and deployment usually work? We have a code repository. That could be a repository inside of Azure DevOps. It supports that. Or it could be a code repository on GitHub. You can integrate those. That's cool. And then you have a pipeline. So the pipeline is a set of instructions where you say what you want to do with that code. So you want to build it into an application, you want to run some tests on it, and then maybe you want to deploy it to your production server somewhere. And those instructions are being executed by a computer. That's the one that we call the pipeline agent. It's usually a server somewhere. You can host your own, or you can use the ones that are provided by Microsoft. But basically, there's a computer doing the stuff that you specified in your pipeline. And that's where the first interesting part happens, which is that computer needs access to stuff in your Azure DevOps environment, because you stored your code there. You might have also stored some environmental variables there. So this user that is executing your pipeline has privileges to do stuff in your Azure DevOps environment. Those might be privileges that you personally don't have. So that's your first avenue for privilege escalation. All right, cool. So we've accessed the code repositories, we've built the application. We want to deploy it to an environment in the cloud somewhere, maybe an Azure subscription. And to do that, your pipeline is using service connections. So service connections are a thing that you can create in Azure DevOps, where you basically store your NPAs. So that could be service principals for your Azure cloud environment, but it could also be API keys for tools that you're using. It's basically the name for a set of credentials that you also want your pipeline to use. And that is the second avenue for privilege escalation. Those service connections and the credentials stored in them might also have privileges that I don't have and that I want. Does that all make sense? Cool. So, then let's take a look. I've put together some live demos, which, fingers crossed, prayers to the demo gods, etc. But in the blue corner, we have our friendly project administrator. He, she, they are very motivated to keep developers happy, but also to keep the project running. They're trying their best, but they might not know everything. In the red corner, we have a compromised developer. That might be a developer who recently got passed up for a promotion and is interested in doing some bad stuff, so a malicious insider. But it could also be a developer's account that got compromised in an attack. So maybe they got spearphished, maybe they were a victim of a supply chain attack, maybe they installed an NPM package at just the wrong time. So for any reason, this account is now gone rogue, and we're gonna see how they do against each other. So this is where I'm going to show you the live stuff. On the, for you, left side of the screen, that's the friendly neighborhood project admin. So that's the good person. And on the right-hand side, we all know that all the hackers are using incognito mode to stay away from the FBI. So that's our compromised account, right? And I'm going to first walk you through what we have in this Azure DevOps project, and then we're going to see how we might hijack that. So here in the friendly neighborhood admin side, we've got a pipeline. I've called it pipeline demo because that's what it is. And what it does is something that we can see in the YAML file. So pipelines are typically specified in YAML files. You can also click them together in a UI, but it's kind of a pain. So what this pipeline does is it has a pool. So that's the type of agent that's going to execute my pipeline. In this case, it's just a standard Microsoft one, but you could specify your own here. But this is basically saying, what system do I want to execute all this stuff on? Then I have a group of variables. I've called it demo vars. And so variables are things that you can create in your project. I'll show that as well. So here you have the library. Here's my group of variables. That's where you could store, environmental variables and stuff. In my case, I've just put one variable in it. It's called secret variable. Ooh. And when you mark something as hidden, then you cannot see the value anymore. Even if you click this little thingy, it's not gonna be there. So I cannot get it out, but my pipeline can. So heading back to the pipeline, I've also created some steps that don't really do much, but it's to illustrate what it would do. So here I just have a command line task named test. This represents whatever testing that you might do in your pipeline. I didn't want to actually test anything because it would take a long while, so I just created some random commands to make it look like it's doing something. And here we are using that secret var. Is that legible, by the way, or should I make it a bit bigger? So here we're using that secret var to put that as an authorization token for some call that we're making somewhere online. And then we have a second stage. That's where we deploy our application, which in my case is going to my Azure subscription. And you might notice here that I have specified it as Azure SC. So that's the name of the service connection to my Azure environment. So I will also show you where the service connections live. If you go into the project settings, there is service connections right there. And here we can see Azure SC. So that is a match one-to-one to a service principal in my Azure subscription. Actually, you can see that right here. So this is in the Azure portal, not Azure DevOps, but Azure Cloud. And when we look here in the users on my little resource group that I'm doing the demo on, we'll see that there are 2 users in it. Anniek, hello, that's me. And then there is this service principal. So this is the user that the pipeline is using to do the stuff in my subscription. And what it's doing in my demo pipeline, whoops, that's a bit too far. What it's doing in my demo pipeline is just create a key vault and then delete it again. That's not super exciting if you have an actual application, but it's enough for me to show that it's doing something. But actually, let me show you that as well. So here we just have some AZ CLI, so it's just the Azure CLI that you can use, commands to create a key vault and then list it and delete it again. And so when you run this pipeline, it'll also show you the output. So let me dive into that one as well. So here you can see, for example, my Azure CLI step where it logged into the AZ CLI with that service connection that I had, and then did a bunch of stuff there to create my, whoops, I can't go any further, to create my key vaults. So far, so good. Makes sense what we've got. All right, so now my compromised developer is going to have some fun with this. So this compromised developer has fewer privileges than the goody project administrator. For example, as a just contributor instead of project admin, they don't have access to any of the settings related to the service connection. So if I would try to look up the service connection here, you can't even see it, for example. But, of course, there's the pipeline who can see all kinds of things. So when I view the pipeline, I can also choose to edit it. And the first thing is maybe this secret variable. Secret var sounds pretty spicy. Maybe we want that. And actually, the developers at Microsoft have thought about kind of protecting those variables that you're using in your pipeline. In fact, if we go back over here and take a look at the output of that piece of the run, here where I have that command, it's made 3 stars out of my bearer token from the secret variable. Ooh, it's protected. Well, it's not protected that hard. This is mostly for decorative purposes. If you go something like echo secret var, and then you base 64 encode it, that's not going to get censored, hey! Or if we go echo secret var, and then we reverse it. Let's see what happens when we do that. So we're going to save this version of the pipeline, and then we're going to run it and see what happens. So as you can see, it's running now, so we have to wait a couple seconds for it to do its thing. Are there any questions in the meantime? Yes. Go ahead. Why does the developer have access to edit the pipeline? Because the pipeline is stored in the same repository as where you store your application code. So the developer would normally be doing stuff in that repo already, which is why they have write access. Good point, I forgot to mention that. So the pipeline YAML is stored in the code repository. Now we can see that our jobs are running. So here we have the same pipeline output again. And now the base 64 version is here. You can just decode that if you want. And the reversed version, so if we sort of try to read this backwards, you can see that the secret variable is, this is my access token backwards. Cool. Excellent point. What else can we do? Let's take another look at the pipeline. Because there was also that service connection thingy to Azure, right? You said that that was important. So, whoops. Let's edit it again. And now what that service connection can do depends a bit on what you configured in the Azure portal. But for now, let's consider whether I'm interested in giving myself some privileges on that Azure subscription. So a thing that you can do is do AZ role assignment, create, saying I want to create a role assignment. Then we need an assignee for that, which is the person who's going to get the role. And you can find that in your Azure portal. So here I am with my developer account logged in as well. And if we go to Entra, you can just find your own user ID. This is the one that you need. So we're going to copy that one into the command. Then we need to say exactly what role we want. We're going to say contributor. And then we need to say where. So we need to specify the scope. And that has to be the path of the resource group that we're looking at, which actually we can just extract from that pipeline run that we had. I'm going to access it here on the good side, but of course the evil one can access this as well. It's just so it's easier to copy paste. So here we should be able to find like, oh, no, it should be there. Let's scroll. There we go. So here we have the subscription ID. Oops, that's a bit much. And the resource group, my beautiful app. So we're going to paste that there as well. So that's just the whole path to my resource group. So let's validate and save that. And run it as well. So in the meantime, you might remember that previously we only had these 2 users in that resource group. As soon as that pipeline is finished running, there should appear 1 more. So let's see how that goes. While we wait for that to actually happen, are there more questions? Yes. How would I prevent this? That's the part that comes after this part. I'm going to show you all the buttons that I know of, which is part of the challenge, is that there are many buttons. So let's see how this is going now. Please don't fail me. There we go. So now it's doing my Azure CLI thing. And instead of creating my key vault, it should be giving me contributor permissions on the resource group. I think we should be done. So let's refresh this and see what happens. Not quite yet. There we go, there we go. I think that's what. This is the part where we frantically hit F5 until it works. And there we go. So now my demo developer is accessing this resource group. So now they can log into the Azure portal and they can start making changes, creating resources, deleting resources, might also be interesting. So there we go again. So that's impact potential number 2. Then I have one more for you, which is repositories. So I've created a super secret repository. So it exists in the same project, but only my Goody account has access to it. So it's called secret repo. But when you try and look that one up using the bad account, it doesn't even show up. I've retracted all privileges. It's not even there. But the pipeline knows that it's there. So let's take a look at how we might use that as an attacker. So how do we even find the repository? Well, there's an API for that. So if you look at the API documentation for Azure DevOps, there's a repositories listing command. So let's go and copy that one. And then we're going to go into our pipeline and edit it some more. And so instead of doing this whole command, maybe we will curl to that. So we need to fill in the organization name. So that's the same one as in the URL. So that's my name. Oops. And the project name was pipeline demo. And of course, we need the authorization header. So instead of the secret variable, we're going to use something that is called the system access token. And that's basically the access token that the pipeline user has been granted. So that's the access token that has privileges to do stuff on Azure DevOps. And you can just call it in the pipeline with system.access access token. Or is it with a lowercase t, actually? I think it's like this, but if it doesn't work, we're going to change it. It looks wrong. Hold on. Let me try this on the... Let's see which one it is. It is with a capital T. I knew it. All right, so let's save and run that, and then see what happens. So we have to wait for the run again. So in those couple of seconds, are there more questions that we... Yes, I see a raised hand over there. Can you escalate privileges higher than contributor? Was that the question? It depends. So the way that the service principal in your Azure environment has been configured, by default, it cannot even grant role access. So yeah, I did have to give it those privileges. But then you can still even be very fine-grained in which privileges it can give. There are several levels. One is like only role assignments that I defined, like a whitelist. But then there's also a stage where you can grant everything except administrator roles. So not owner, but yes, contributor. And then there's a stage where you can say, do absolutely anything you want. So I've configured this one to grant only non-admin privileges, which is why I use contributor. But so it depends on what your service principal can do. What happened here? Oh, yes. There is already a secret repo, and I'm going to find out that it exists and then read it. Oh, yeah, of course. So let's do a little bit of a sidetrack. So the secret repo is just a repo where I have revoked the read privileges for my secret user. So if we go into the settings over here, and we have repositories, and you select your, the secret one, of course. The secret repo, then you have these security settings here, where you can see who has access to this repo. And here, there's my evil demo dev user, and I've set their privileges to read to deny. So that's how I've hidden it from that user. Answer your question? Cool. So then let's see what happens. Did I do something wrong with my... Unexpected end of... Oh, dang. Prayers to the demo gods were not good enough. So let's see if we can fix that. What did I do? I forgot some quotes right over there, I think. And I think that should be it. So, fingers crossed for the second run. I guess this is the part where I do a little dance or answer more questions. Please, questions? Okay. So it should be here now. So, here we go. So I have one long bit of JSON. Fortunately, we can format that pretty easily. Oops, no, I don't want any cookies. No. So if we just parse this output from that API call, minus this. Where do we print this? There we go. So now we can see that there are a couple of repos listed in here. One of them is the pipeline demo one, which we already knew about, but then we scroll a bit more, and now we can see that there's also this secret repo that exists. Excellent. So step 2, now that we know about its existence, is of course to get it for ourselves. So if we go back to the pipeline again and make one more edit, what we can do is basically import that repo as a resource for our pipeline to use. So first we're going to specify it up at the top. Let me just get the YAML formatting right. So we want to get resources, and it's going to be repositories. And this repository is going to get an alias called secret, and it's going to be of type git. And the name is secret repo. Based on this, Azure DevOps knows where it is, because it's just going to assume that it's in the same project. And then when we're going to do our test stages, we're just going to do a couple more steps. So we have the command line task here, but underneath that, I'm going to first do a step where I check out secrets. So I call it by its alias. And I think, what? Oh, I think I indented it too much. Hold on. There we go. All good. So let's do that. And then it should exist on our pipeline agent, so on the server that is doing our stuff. And we should be able to do something like cat all the files. And now it's doing something interesting. It's saying, I don't know where that repository is. And it's doing that because I don't have privileges to see the repository. But I'm going to ignore this warning and save it anyway, because I know that it exists. And we're going to run it again. And then the end result should be that we can see the contents of that repository. I'm going to give you some spoilers on what's in there. It's not much. So, oops, a bit bigger maybe. So that secret repository just contains a text file where I have written the text, this is the README content of the super secret repo. So it's not super exciting in practice in this case, but I think the point will be clear. And here we can see this is the README content of the super secret repo. So now we've gotten ourselves access to a repository that we previously didn't even know about. So I think that that's illustrating the point nicely. So let's head back to the slides for a second and sort of summarize what the potential impact of this kind of privilege escalation can be. So it depends. We already had that question about like, but can I do this as well? Well, it depends on which privileges the pipeline user has. That's something that you can configure that we're going to look into in just a second. But it could include repositories, variable groups, artifacts that you've stored in Azure DevOps. And then on the service connection side, that could mean cloud environments that you get access to, Kubernetes clusters. Maybe you have a private Docker registry where you store images with your applications in them. I don't know, API keys to stuff. Basically, whatever you have stored inside of your service connections could be fair game. So the exact impact is always a bit depends on what those privileges are. But there is definitely a lot of potential there. So now let's look at how to fix that. And I know quite a few fixes, but not all of them. Even in the creation of this presentation, I discovered some new buttons that I previously didn't know about. We're going to go through Azure DevOps. There's going to be lots of menus. Don't worry about writing it down or taking pictures. I have slides at the end with all the instructions where you can find those settings. So let's just take a look at what we can do. So first of all, it seems pretty bad that this compromised user can run the pipeline. So we can try to block that first. So you can go into the pipeline settings, and you can do manage security on that as well. And then we can find our evil user and basically say this user cannot queue builds. So queue builds is what Azure DevOps calls run pipeline. So now that we've denied that, let's see what it looks like for the attacker. Let's say that we want to edit the pipeline and run it again. You can already see that the run button is gone now. Why is the run gone? Here we still have it. So let's say we want to run it. Now it says access denied, demo dev needs queue build permissions. Problem solved, right? No, you might have noticed that we're half an hour into a 1 hour presentation. The problem is unfortunately not solved. So let's take a look at what the bypass would be for this fix, which is to modify the trigger of the pipeline. So here you can see that the trigger is none, meaning I have to manually push the run button to make it do the thing. But you can also specify triggers for branches of your repository, for example. So if you say trigger main instead, and I think that that's the correct formatting with the correct spaces. It's still complaining about that repo that we don't know about, but we're going to ignore that. So now I didn't even need to click run, and we should see that the pipeline is running because, well, I made changes to main, so it started running like I told it to. Okay, but I hear you think, well, we have professional developers, you know, all of our repositories, they have protections on the main branch. We require a pull request for that. Someone else is going to look at it. And I say, fantastic point. We're going to set that up. So we're going to go into our repository settings. And there we're going to change some policies. Oops, I need to go to the correct one. So here we have our pipeline demo repo. Let's say that we want, that's not the settings I'm looking for. The branch policies, that's the one I was looking for. So here we can require a number of reviewers for our main branch. So let's say that the minimum number of reviewers is 2. 2 people need to look at it. Perfect. So now when my attacker wants to do yet another edit to this pipeline, which is just, we're editing it faster than it can run. But that's all right. So let's say that I want to change this again. I want to do something. Save it. And now it goes, oh no, I cannot push to the branch. Do you want to make a pull request? Yeah, let's make a pull request. Oh, it already exists. A new PR branch. And now, of course, we can look at the pull requests, but since I required that there are 2 validations, the one that I just created, I mean, I can approve it myself, but I cannot merge it because I don't have the privileges. Problem solved, right? Problem not quite solved. Because again, we're 35 minutes into a 1 hour presentation. So let's take a look at how we can bypass that. And it's pretty much the same way that we bypassed it the first time. I know that this says trigger main, but what if it says trigger bypass? And we're going to save that to a nice fresh branch, which we're also going to call bypass. And I don't even think we need to start a pull request. So we're going to save that. And once again, the pipeline is running. Woo! So now what are we going to do about it? We could try to stop people from creating new branches, but that's not really an option. Like, developers create branches all the time to do their jobs. This would be a massive pain in the ass if we did that. But there are other solutions, and that's where all the buttons in Azure DevOps are going to come in. So what are we going to do? Let's see. We are first going to consider the option of restricting triggers to the pipeline. Like, let's say we only want the pipeline to trigger from the main branch and not from any of the other ones, right? You can do that. So if you go into the pipeline settings, and then you hit edit, and then you go in the tiny little menu, there's a triggers option here. I think that's visible. And here there's a magical button. It's called override the YAML. So you can tick this box, and basically whatever it says in the YAML about what the trigger conditions are, we don't care. It only does what we write over here. So you could put main branch there, and then no matter which other branches you're committing on, it's never going to trigger, even if those branches say that that's the trigger condition. That's possible, but I don't recommend doing this, actually. This is the bad solution that you should not remember. It's there if you want, but the reason I don't recommend it is because it gets kind of confusing. Because now we have two sources of truth for what your pipeline triggers are. 6 months down the line, you're going to want to make changes to how it triggers, and then you're going to forget that you ever ticked this box and wonder why it doesn't work. Or maybe you have a pipeline that you want to run from other branches. I think it's quite common for people to have a setup where they have a pipeline that runs build, test, deploy. And if you commit on a feature branch, you just want to do build, test. And if you commit on the main branch, you want to do build, test, deploy. And you can make conditions for that in your pipeline, all cool. But you want the multiple triggers. So what do I recommend instead? I recommend instead to go into your service connections and configure it there. So as I mentioned already, the only people who can edit these settings are project administrators and the person who created that particular service connection. But if you go into these settings, there's this menu here called approvals and checks. And what you can do there is create restrictions on the use of the service connection itself. And this makes a lot more sense because the service connection is the set of credentials that you're trying to protect. So let's put the restrictions on that resource as well. And a very obvious one that you can do is a branch control restrictions. So if we say the only branch that is allowed to use this service connection is main, you can even enable this verify branch protection, which is going to make it check that you also have other restrictions on that branch. So that check that I put on that 2 people need to verify the pull request, if that's there, it counts as protected. If it's not there, no pipeline run for you if you tick this box. So let's create this restriction, and then let's see what it looks like from the attacker's perspective. If we try to trigger another pipeline run on our magical bypass branch again, whoops, that's one too far. Let's say we make some other random changes. And I don't want to... Oh, sorry, I'm editing on main. Hold on. So on our bypass branch, we're doing stuff. And that should trigger the pipeline run, which it does. But that's okay. Because what we're going to see happening now is that, yeah, we have those 2 steps. One is test. That one is the one where we did those curl commands and whatever. It doesn't use a service connection. And the second one is deploy. That's the one where we had all that Azure cloud stuff. And that's the one where we use a service connection. And that's the one that is about to get blocked if I did everything right. There. So the pipeline run failed due to a check. And what is the check? The check is that there's a branch control restriction on the service connection. And I think that this is a really sensible thing to do because you already have your protections on your main branch. At least I hope you do. And this way you can sort of piggyback on those and say, well, only when we're making changes to that branch, we're going to check it. But also only then do you get to use that service connection. And you can do the exact same thing with your resources in the library as well. So that secret variable that I showed you before, you can go into your variable groups and you will find that same approvals and checks menu where you can also do checks on that. There's also this approvals button. That's where you can specify again that you want this 4 eyes principal approval system before we run the service connection or run with this variable group. It's possible, but I don't recommend it for exactly the same reason that it creates a pain in the ass for developers. So if you enable this with an approval, it means that if you have your protected main branch already, someone's going to do a pull request. They're going to be asked to get approvals for that pull request. Then the pipeline is going to start running. Then it's going to need approvals again for the service connection. So it just creates this like approval fatigue where people are just, yeah, I'll click the button, and they're not actually going to do any reviews. So highly recommend the branch controls. There are also some other fun things that you can do here, like set it to only business hours or something. But I think that, your average red hat or black hat is not going to be much bothered by having to do work during business hours. Right. And then, let's see what else we can do. I have a little bonus demo for you, which involves public Git repositories, GitHub repositories. So I have a little extra pipeline. Hello. I wish to close this. So I have a little extra pipeline, and this one isn't created from Azure DevOps. This one is attached to a GitHub repository. So here I have my lovely, there's nothing actually in this folder. There's just a pipeline YAML, just to demonstrate that there's a pipeline that can run. And as you can see, well, you can do runs and it'll print something. Now, the interesting thing in this pipeline is that it has a trigger on a PR, not specifically on a change on a branch, but on a PR for a branch. So what I can do as my evil user is go to the same repository. So here it is. And then I can make a fork. Again, I don't need any privileges on this repository. This is just me finding it on the internet. Where are we now? I said I wanted to make a fork. Where's my little fork button? It was there before, I swear. Ah, here's the fork button. Oh, I'm not logged in anymore. Oh, yeah, pipeline demo dev. Am I going to have to do that? I mean, I have it open, just in case. Oh, come on. I mean, I have that phone in my pocket, so I have the time. Oh, come on. Okay. Maybe I'm not going to show you the demo. Do we really want the demo? Okay, fine. But now I'm going to have to show you my phone number. I don't want to show you my phone number. I'm going to do the dramatic reenactment of the demo, I think, at this point. So what I could do is make a fork, and then on that fork, let's just go back to where we're looking at the repo. So I can make a fork. On that fork, make some changes to the YAML, do whatever the heck I want. Maybe take the environment variables of the agent and exfiltrate them to one of my servers. I don't know. And then I submit a pull request from it. And that pull request is going to trigger a pipeline run in the Azure DevOps project. In fact, I have evidence of that. Here is the non-malicious user. And if we look at the history of this pipeline run, when I practiced this the day before, so here we can see where my attacker GitHub user has made the pull request and started running the pipeline as well. So this is something that's not going to happen without you knowing about it, unless you had your organization set up some really dodgy settings in Azure DevOps. So the way that you can prevent this is actually that it's off by default. If you go into the organization settings, even, you can disable this for your entire org. There are settings here for pipelines, where you can limit building pull requests from 4 GitHub repositories. Hey, that's exactly what we want to do. So you can customize the exact rules. You can say either never run from pull requests, run from pull requests, but then restrict what privileges that run has. So maybe if you just want to run some validations on it and it doesn't need access to all the Azure DevOps stuff, you can just restrict that. So highly recommend that one. Oh, and yeah, if you want to restrict access to repositories inside Azure DevOps, so that demo that I did like 2 demos ago where we found a secret repo, you can do that as well in the pipeline settings. Actually, let's go in there. So here we have limit job authorization scope to current project for release pipelines. That's going to limit the scope, but also protect access to repositories in YAML pipelines. That's the one where you're going to need to give explicit permission to access that repository before you can actually complete the run. So let's head back to the slides and sort of wrap this up. This was really not a joke. As you saw me click through it, I'm sure that there were many times you were like, wait, where was that? And there's a little settings hidden everywhere. I hope I got the most important ones. I don't guarantee it. But that's also to make my point that doing this is difficult. I am not surprised that in organizations this goes wrong, because something doesn't work, you enable the thing in the setting that you managed to find, but that also opened up like the rest of your environment. And it's very difficult to do the fine-grained settings of exactly where you can arrange what so that you have true least privilege. So the most important things that I want you to walk away from this presentation with is, first of all, that setup that I mentioned where you have a protected branch. So the one where you have a pull request to merge into main, and you make people review it well, and then use that protected branch also to piggyback your service connections and your secret variables, approvals and checks too. So I think that is a really workable solution. Have your protected main branch, and restrict the use of your service connections to that branch. That does mean that we're relying very heavily on that 4 eyes principle, right? If we are going to say, well, then someone has to approve it, then that person does actually need to look before they approve it. And I find that this is a very difficult part of software development, is getting people to actually review the code that they approve. I haven't found the answer yet. I also think that the presentation that we had just before about how education is not the same thing as behavior change really rings true here. So if anyone has any solutions to this problem where people need to actually look before they hit approve, I would love to hear it. Anyone suggestions right now, or should we? Okay. Second of all, least privilege, I think, is the name of the game here. And that goes for every party involved. So the service principals, or the whatever credentials you have stored in those service connections should be limited to the scope that they need to do what you want the pipeline to do. There was that question over there of like, can you change it to something other than contributor? Well, it can if you have that enabled, but if you don't need that to be enabled, you should not have it enabled. If you don't need your service principal to be owner on the subscription, don't make them owner on the subscription. Make them only able to deploy the stuff that they really need to do. Of course, that doesn't stop attackers from abusing those privileges, but at least it's the least possible. Then also, the pipeline token scope. Those are the settings that I showed you just now, where you limit whether the pipeline user has access to repositories and other resources in Azure DevOps. Actually, I'm going to show you one more thing about that. I'm going to head back real quick. So these are the main settings to do that with, where you can basically limit what that system access token can do. But if you want to get really fine-grained, the pipeline user, it is actually a user in your Azure DevOps project that you can assign privileges to. I'm going to show you that. If you go into the project settings, then you can find sort of all the users that exist. And there we have where is he? I think he's in the build administrators. Okay, I'm going to find him somewhere else. So if you go into the security settings for your pipeline, you can see that there is this pipeline demo build service. And so this one is always named after name of project, build service, in brackets, name of organization. And this is actually a user that you can assign privileges to. So if you want this user to not have access to a specific repo or something, just find it. You just need to copy paste the name into whatever security window that you're currently configuring. And then you can do whatever the heck you want with it. It's just kind of difficult to find. And I think the easiest part is just to slide the sliders that I showed you earlier. And then, of course, also these privileges for the developers working on the stuff. Of course, they need privileges to do their job. We all understand that. That's fine. But if you have maybe multiple application repositories in one Azure DevOps project, and you just put your developers in the contributors group, that means they now have edit privileges on all the repositories, unless you specifically block them out of specific repositories again. So that's also an option to limit the scope of what a compromised account can do. Yeah, that's what I just said. So just to make this whole searching for settings bit a little bit easier to understand, so there are the organization settings, which are the thing that like the bar that you cannot go below. If something is prohibited in the organization settings, you cannot enable it in the project settings or anywhere else. If it's allowed by the organization settings, you can also allow it in your own project, or you can disallow it in your own project. So you can go stricter, but not looser than the organization settings. And those are the settings that look really the same in the organization and the project scope. So if you go to the org settings and you go to the pipeline configuration, these toggles are the same ones that you see if you go into the actual project, in the project settings, and also to pipeline settings. So this is just the stuff that you cannot overwrite from the organization settings. So if you are in an organization and you have the power to disable this stuff for everyone, check if anything's going to break before you actually disable it. But then it's probably a good idea to look into to doing those things. And then there are the individual objects, so your repos, pipelines, service connections, secrets, variables, that you can do individual fine-grained settings on. So that was what I wanted to share with you. I hope you will go forth and secure your Azure DevOps environment. So who here who previously raised their hand saying, yeah, we use that, who's going to look into that now when they get back to work on Monday? That's a good dozen or so of you. Great, I have achieved something. So I have a couple of minutes left for questions if you want. I anticipated that the first question would be, could you just repeat where I can find all those magical settings? Yes. I have hidden all the screenshots and where to find them after that slide. And if you scan this QR code, you will end up at the slides, so you can just take a look at it at home. Are there any questions? Yes.
Yeah, we have room for one short question-ish, I think.
Thank you for the demo. It was really interesting.
Thank you.
Just maybe a question and a comment. There are so many now security solutions to secure the whole pipeline, right, of CI/CD. There are different big players in that to provide DevOps security, and I think that it would do the reviewing at some point, like if there was an open library called or a user that has not only read access but wider access, and it does that. So maybe my feedback or question: have you looked into that, and what is your take in securing Azure and other CI/CD pipelines with third-party security solutions?
I haven't found any tools that do what I want to do here, which is go through your Azure DevOps settings and tune them to the most secure version. Like mostly when I hear about pipeline security, they mean security in the pipeline. So doing security tools, code scanners and that kind of stuff. But I haven't found any tools that do a review of your Azure settings. If anyone knows of any, I would love to hear about that.
Thank you. Another short question?
There's one over there.
Okay, perfect.
Hi, thank you very much. Do you have any advice on automatically detecting these kinds of attacks?
As I said, I don't know of any tools that are doing that currently. I think your best bet would be some scripting with the API or something. I think your best bet is disabling it by just making it impossible instead of trying to detect that it's happening. To be honest, I don't have a good solution for that.
Okay, thank you.
I think that was the last question that I'm allowed to have.
Well, it's more because of time, because we have to give you a present, of course. And give it up for Anniek.
Thank you.